This is the 5-minute guide to the Erebus class monitors of the Royal Navy.
Okay, so let's start by saying that these ships were perhaps not the best named ships for the Royal Navy. One can imagine the crew being told, "Here's your pair of small specialist ships adapted for a single purpose that involves a significant amount of danger," named after another pair of small specialist ships adapted for a single purpose that involved significant amounts of danger. Oh, and the last pair vanished without a trace, taking all hands with them. Yeah, I can just imagine they were racing to get on board. Anyways, the Erebus class consisted of a pair of monitors. Now, the term monitor had evolved from the titular USS Monitor and its direct descendants of the American Civil War. Whilst those ships were heavily armoured coastal defence vessels with a secondary shore attack role, these ships were relatively lightly armoured coastal vessels designed almost exclusively for shore bombardment. What they did share, however, was a propensity to use extremely large guns for their size. The idea of the ships was to provide heavy gunfire support for the Allied armies. The British had a wide range of odd battleship caliber guns lying around, and even a cruiser-sized gun on land was a huge undertaking to move, whereas putting these much larger weapons on a relatively small ship was easy and vastly more mobile, albeit limited to engaging targets within a couple of dozen miles of water. The ship's displacement would be only around 8,000 tons, but they would be armed with a single twin 15-inch gun turret each. The Erebus would have its armament taken from the earlier Monitor Marshal Ney, which in itself had had its armament originally intended for one of the later R-class battleships, but the Marshal Ney had turned out to have engines about as reliable as a politician's promise. The Terror's guns would be one of the twin turrets built for HMS Furious back before the decision to give her single 18-inch guns was taken. And before you ask, yes, the 18-inch gun did end up on another monitor, which was a fate shared by most of the Royal Navy's odd spare gun collection. As built, the ships only had about 4 inches of armour, but knowing that they would be operating along the enemy coast, massive anti-torpedo bulges were installed, which also aided in keeping their draft shallow. A pair of 6-inch guns and 4 3-inch anti-aircraft guns were also installed. Both ships were laid down in 1915 and launched in 1916. With their 12-knot maximum speed, they operated mainly near the occupied Belgium coast during the First World War. The Terror was part of the Dover Patrol operating against German forces off said Belgian coast and was torpedoed by a German motorboat in October 1917, but her massive anti-torpedo measures saved her, and 3 months later she was back in service. She would then fight alongside the Erebus in the Zeebrugge raid and attempt to close that particular port to use by U-boats, before closing out her activity in this particular conflict by providing gunnery support for the Fourth Battle of Ypres. Following the war, she was used for gunnery experiments against older British warships as well as captured German vessels. Her small size but top-of-the-line guns meant that the effects of British battleship gunfire and new shells could be assessed against real targets without the expense of having to use an actual battleship or battlecruiser for the trials. During this period, both ships received a refit, with all guns apart from the main turret replaced by a battery of 8 single 4-inch guns, 2 updated 3-inch anti-aircraft guns, and 2 quad 50 caliber machine guns, although at the outbreak of World War II, some additional anti-aircraft guns would be added to both ships in a somewhat haphazard way. The Terror was in Singapore at the time of the outbreak of World War II and was recalled to the Mediterranean, first defending Malta with her secondary weapons against Italian bombers, and then attacking Italian army formations in Libya as well as fixed fortifications. In between these bombardments, she also supplied fresh water to the advancing Imperial troops, as this was faster than using overland routes. However, she was attacked in February 1941 by a number of German Ju-88s and badly damaged. Although she survived the attack and was taken in tow, she sank before she was able to reach a safe port. The Erebus had a similar early career, including suffering damage from a German attack, in this case a remote-controlled motorboat full of explosive. But after the First World War ended, she was sent to provide fire support for the abortive attempt by the so-called White Russians to overthrow the communist government, before returning to assist in the gunnery trials mentioned earlier, and then settling in for a stint as a gunnery training ship. She was due to head to Cape Town as a guard ship when the Second World War broke out, and was instead diverted to the Mediterranean, where she initially operated against Italian and later German Afrika Korps forces in North Africa, whilst also running supplies into Tobruk when the city was under siege. She received some damage while assisting the invasion of Sicily before being deployed to support the D-Day landings, engaging a number of German heavy gun batteries. During this engagement, one of her shells went off early and destroyed the gun that it was in. With the gun replaced once the ship was back in dock, it was put back into action later that year against the occupied port of Le Havre, and after further damage engaging a gun battery in that area, she was repaired again and sent to support an amphibious assault in the Netherlands in 1944, which would help open up the port of Antwerp to Allied shipping. She survived the war, but with no further need for her services, the ship was scrapped in July 1946.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below.